people. So we are going to continue reading In the Spirit of the Earth by Calvin Luther Martin. It's really a deep book, just trying to examine if cause and effect wasn't happening as it did throughout the cycle of life. What if this part of history never happened? So it's a real crazy way of thinking, but we're going to continue in the book. We just reached chapter 3 last time, and we're on page 53. Time was the God, the invention of history. So we're going to get started right here. Alright. Have a sip of coffee. It's early morning. It's 5:31, guys. Okay. Here we go. Farming is essentially scheduling, timing. On the other hand, so too is hunting and gathering. It is a commonplace that hunters are keenly aware of the seasonality of animal and plant abundance and join this to a precise knowledge of the location of the event. Hunters carry elaborate mind maps, often assisted by some sort of iconographical device of their familiar territory, and they learn from elders and their own experience when to be at a certain spot to encounter game, plants, fish, or what have you, harvesting each as it appears, all of which is transacted within the perceptual scheme already described, but also within a perception of limit, human limit, that humans must restrict their impact on the earth, a principle that hunters expressed in two ways: a very real and functioning human population limit joined to an equal rigorous practice of partial harvest. There was a ceiling beyond which the land and sea were not to be taken. To do so would be immoral, unnatural, and dangerous. Curiously, all of them concepts that Neolithic societies rejected or conceptually inverted. Notice that nature was not regarded by hunters as either parsimonious or exhausted. It was more a case of nature being viewed as forever prolific and giving, where it behoved man and woman to comprehend and accept her schedule and place, spacing of such largesse. Hunters, in a sense, were taught from generation to generation to read nature's time instrument, better yet, her scheduling spacing instrument. Inherent in this time-place perception of plant and animals was the understanding that nature herself would determine the terms of abundance, location, and timing of each of these articles, being really of human need. Actually, this is not quite accurate. It was not nature, some monolithic, nebulous entity that decided. It was the plant or animal being themselves that decided. Hunters cultivated a relationship with individual plants and animals, not with nature. An important point. This is part 2. I'm kidding you. The Seneca westernmost of the Six Nations Iroquois have a wonderful story illustrating this. The story is called The Old Man and the Little Man, and was collected on the Catsagarus Reserve in the 1880s. It was related at the time in Seneca. What follows is an imperfect English translation. The tale begins with a man who lived in a solitary place all alone by himself, and he was well off, but lived on dry, barren land. There was no water, though he was very fond of water. With this pregnant introduction, it goes on to tell of his success in locating a colossal underground spring, whereupon he built a dam to create a pond to husband his newfound treasure. Thus established, the man married, raised children, and in due course became the patriarch of a large and prosperous nation of similar dam builders. One day, a little small man appeared, hoping to reproduce the success of the old man and his tribe. Though granted permission to establish themselves on the old man's waterways, the little people were too puny to erect dams. So they settled for living in burrows along the banks of the streams, and with time they too flourished. And by now it has dawned on the listener that this is a tale about the Beaver Nation, which is the old man's people, and the Muskrat Nation, the little man's people. A cautionary tale about the swimmer people, my terms. Disaster struck when enemies, humans, began a series of unprovoked attacks, first against the Beaver people and then against the Muskrat people. Under repeated assault, Castor Beaver and Ondatra, the muskrat, were nearly exterminated. But then the human persons began suffering grievously themselves. Mysterious diseases now stalked them, likewise without quarter. While on his way home from such a raid, the leader of one of the war parties had a dream in which it was revealed that the contagion had originated in the wrath of the old man, who, the dream visitor went on to disclose, was an exceedingly powerful being. So appraised the human people and now earnestly sought to make amends with the beaver and the muskrat people, visiting the desolated ponds to deliver speeches of apology and peace, and offer tobacco. The conversion from slaughterer to supplicant is exceedingly important. See how it involves the power inherited in words the swimmer people understood, and the healing grace of a plant. The new relationship became one of the communion through words of apology and peace, as well as through the restorative and narcotic powers of tobacco. Dream messages, incidentally, were very traditional among the Six Nations. The story concludes by saying that the old man now presented himself to one of the human people in yet another dream, declaring that he was not angry with him because he had killed so many people of his nation, but for wasting our bones and wasting our flesh. We are willing that you should come occasionally and take as many of our numbers as you need, but no more. If you will do this, we will hereafter be friends and not enemies. I have heard all of your speeches and seen you burn tobacco. The sickness might go from your people. We will take sickness from you if you will do all I have directed. And so it was that the 5 Iroquois nation, later to become 6, forged a covenant of peace and amity with the beaver and muskrat people, which both sides, human and swimmer people, maintained inviolate until other disruptions complicated the world. So moving on to part 3 now. Let me just see something. We can read up to part 5, I guess. It's not, these parts are very short. Yeah, okay. Under the Neolithic impulse, mankind's sense of space-time changed dramatically. Prerequisite to the change, however, was a fundamental shift in the locus of plant and animal volition. plant and animal permission. For the coming of the Neolithic marks the onset of the dangerous process of denying will to individual plants and animals and repositioning their will in cosmic or meteorological forces. In practical terms, the scheduling of plant and animal fluorescence and reproduction were denied those being and placed instead within an increasingly remote and esoteric realm of sky beings. As hunters had sought to influence individual plant and animal behavior through ritual and magic, so nascent farmers exerted themselves to influence the great cosmic forces. The sky beings soon dominated gods who controlled weather, rain, drought, frost, warmth, etc., and the punctuality of the seasons. Priests would emerge as a special rank of individual uniquely qualified in the art of cosmic divination, and more subtly and dangerously time itself on behalf of a society now increasingly committed to engineering food into existence. When to clear the land of brush, when to plant and when to harvest, when to let the arable rest, when to turn on and turn off the various irrigation mechanisms in arid regions, calculation of the number of harvests one might extract from fields per season, and the time staggering of crops per growing season. These matters were scheduling and spacing, along with the need for group coordination and control, were all now placed in the hands and rhetoric and imagination of a priestly class swiftly becoming ensconced as a ruling elite. People now turn to the heavens for guidance in these affairs, guidance, authority, and power. For the secret to the riddle of plant and even animal production and reproduction was timing, time which became a clock. If Homo could but contrive a clock, he would stand in a position to control the seminal powers of creation and procreation. A careful watch of the heavens, of constellations and planets in their orderly march across the night sky, of the solstice and the phases of our companion moon, revealed such a gigantic mechanism. Perhaps there was as well the palpable lesson of the lunar female menstrual cycle, attendant upon women's possessing the earth's mysterious powers of fertility, of production. If these celestial bodies, so measured in their movements, were divine or controlled by the divine, then man himself, the masculine gender, here probably being fully justified, could make contact and perhaps exert influence. In any case, it must have become clear that the mind of these celestials was mathematically precise and beautiful, and computable by those who made it their business to attend to such things. Priests, astronomers. Here behind the caprice, the willfulness of plant and animal powers of scheduling, of economy, of estrus, rutting, and the flowering of plants, lay the higher power, in truth, the laws of celestial time. Quantifiable time. The priests who figured this out must have sensed themselves ushered into the presence of the mighty beings. It was verily a fall out of nature into knowledge. Maybe the fall that damns us all, bewitched by time. Things. Observe Isley quoting another, were to grow incalculable by being calculated. Man's powers were finite. The forces he had released in nature recognized no such limitations. They were the irrevocable monsters conjured up by a completely amateur sorcerer. Time's arrow, the cosmic monster that has proved itself infinitely more terrifying than any projectile ever devised by the Paleolithic imagination. Part 5. This part's a little longer. Actually, we'll stop there today. Nah, I'll just have some coffee. Okay, part 5. To mint animals for human time, read economy, required fencing and tethering, foddering and sheltering, and protection against predation. Very likely the detention of the newborn as a means of controlling the mother. Clocking, estrus, and selective breeding for desirable traits through manipulation of the mating process. One can quite properly label the process detention, forced breeding, and patronization, foddering, sheltering, and protection. These constituting, of course, the precise terms of slavery, human slavery down through the millennia since the Neolithic. Small wonder that many scholars detect in animal domestication the ideological origin of human bondage, especially when the human victims could likewise be depersonalized and rendered as bestial, that is inserted into the below threshold category of animals, who long before had been imagined and spoken about of the realm of personhood, having violation and giving permission by that clever speaker and artificer of creation. Farming societies had a different fate in store for the animals that remained. These became either deified. Ancient Egypt and Mesoamerica provided two stunning illustrations of this principle, but one finds it in many, if not all, other civilizations. Or vilified as wild, meaning dangerous, coldly brutal, and with all outlaw. Whether enslaved, enshrined, or outlawed, beasts were still, I maintain, domesticated to human terms. Perhaps the most interesting common demeanor here is that each category in its own way was victim of human fears. Deified creatures represent the Neolithic fear of the otherwise nebulous spirit realm and the effort to comprehend and more immaculate these terrible powers. Though the creation of animalized deities, essentially, it was a matter of controlling dangerous spirituality by imagining animalized gods who behaved the way humans did. The result, more accurately, was the domestication of the fear of the numinous, whereas with barnyard domestication, one might say mankind was endeavored to domesticate its fear of famine. It is interesting to contemplate the God of the Old Testament in this context. Jehovah was tirelessly in reminding his people that he beggared human conception and human likeness, including those occasions when the latter lay thinly disguised in animal form. Indeed, nothing infuriated the Almighty more than the spectacle of the Israelites, bending the knee to graven animal images. Through his prophets he pronounced them frauds, raining down terror to drive the lesson home. He was right. These were nothing more than clever impersonations of Neolithic men and women themselves, which of course leaves the question, who then was this Jehovah? In my opinion, a frank and virulently potent icon of a newly emergent historical consciousness. Essentially, a spokesman for the conviction held by a nucleus of individuals that the destiny of the children of Israel should not be frittered away in parochial issues, such as those which consume the energies of the animal idols, one witnesses in profusion among the pagan societies throughout the ancient Middle East. I will say more about the post-Neolithic image of plant and animals in a later chapter. What interests me more in this present one is the dying of a sense of historical awareness. Homo sapiens would become historical in outlook and behavior only with the advent of Neolithic history. I believe is very definitely an artifact, a fabrication of the Neolithic in my mind. The most interesting and by far most important contrivance of that paradigm. Before that, if we can extrapolate from more recent hunter-gatherer evidence, humanity was native of such a concept. There was no need for history in the world as perceived by hunters. But farmers were a different story. Casting an eye around the world at the various foci of the Neolithic, one sees repeatedly the irresistible urge to commit oneself to the siren song of history. The intoxicating belief that mankind is in truth a special creation, a superior being, superior to everything save the unseen and superordinary powers of the heavens, who have chosen this human vessel as their special agent in carrying out their will. The link between sky gods and man was initially forged. Let me reiterate, in the repositioning of productive and procreative power from earthly plant and animal beings, possibly even include women, to more omnipotent, more generalized cosmic forces. Somehow, early in the relationship with these new sky gods, the meditating priest king seemingly assumed a sense of personal mission to carve a divinely sanctioned order out of what they believed to be chaos. All about them. Invariably, we witness these budding civilizations or city-states launching themselves on ambitious building programs, construction spectacular, even flamboyant, typically colossal temples, pyramids, and plazas, for the glory and pleasure of the heavenly pantheon with whom these potent priest-kings conferred and consorted. Such structures were built as well, no doubt, to overawe the populace. Along with this construction went the amassing of wealth, precious metals, stones, and fabrics worked by armies of artisans who refined objects, frescoes and murals lavished on building exteriors and interiors, statues, idols, and altars, etc. All this, too, for the delectation of the heavens pantheon, whose ranks the reigning monarch, his family, and ancestors now solemnly joined. Trade and commerce, like tendrils reaching out and wrapping themselves around the sources of this wealth, would start out as another royal and divine prerogative. prerogative. As would war, holy wars push back the bounds of the celestial center, bringing both benighted landscape and its peoples under the care and fatherly guidance of the Anointed One. Thus, foreign lands or cities were assailed to envelop them within the spiritual economy of this, the only legitimate state of humanness. Success in all of these endeavors was undoubtedly taken as a sign of godly favor and alliance. Meanwhile, the corn or grain-fed population grew by leaps and bounds, becoming the multitude. And thus, one speculates, was history launched in more than one Neolithic civilization. History, bear in mind, was initially royal history, dynastic history, the story, more, the recording of a single ruler or his family, generation to generation, and their divine mission order out of chaos. Europe, seething with population resentment against its own decadent monarchies, would have a glimpse of one such paradigmatic king ruling the Hawaiian island at the turn of the 19th century. Here was a divinity about whom Marshall Sahlins writes, to be able to put the society in order, the new king must first reproduce an original disorder. Having committed his monstrous acts against society, proving he is stronger than it, the ruler proceeds to bring systems out of chaos, recapitulating the initial constitution of social life. The accession of the king is thus a recreation of the universe. The king makes his advent as a god. He was a god who lived both the life of the people and the life of the cosmos. Simultaneously, the sole individual with the divine right to calculate society's time. In dynastic genealogies, in royal traditions, I was born when Kamehameha conquered Oahu, one of his subjects might say, whereas I myself, subjected to not and unlike history, was born at the end of the Second World War. I might say. It was worth noticing that the structures erected by these priest-kings were intended to be permanent witnesses to a glorious point in time. The temples, pyramids, and palaces, statues, stelae, and other such monumental artifacts constituted tangible expressions of history. They left something human, something connected with the activities of a special individual on the sacred landscape, itself a mirror of the celestial landscape. Even their destruction or dereliction had a history. Noiselessly crumbling there in desert, jungle, or plain, they prompted a certain recollection of human endeavor and ambition. Artifice such as this would inevitably trigger historical awareness. Here was palpable history that had transformed the land, hard-edged testament to mankind's presence, man's thoughts, his viewpoint, and his violent separation from the surround. Except that the stone, in falling down in bits and pieces to sand and soil, eloquently suggests otherwise. In sum, the priest-kings aimed to locate themselves and their heroics, including their people, in stone monument, and hence stories intended to endure. Consider the Egyptian pyramids, Sumerian temples and palaces, and so forth. The idea was to insert oneself into this powerful holy continuum of time of history. There is something sacrosanct about being able to make one's mark on history. The sun's coming up. Last page for today. Though some monument or achievement. In modern times, the effort has been not so much to build a tangible monument as to be remembered by history, to go down in the history books. The point being is that with the Neolithic and massive, grandiose architectural and engineering products, the artifacts themselves become historical benchmarks. More, they simulate a certain kind of story told down through the ages, for they are there, and must, it is believed, be explained. Human monuments thus become a means of preempting the stories inherent in the trammeled landscape, the pristine surround. By way of contrast, notice how very different this is from the imprint left by hunters and gatherers. Even in recent times, the structures assembled by them are seasonal, impermanent. The landscape reclaims them within several seasons of their abandonment. Hunters leave no lasting testament of their passage or presence, reflecting on imagination which eschews such chauvinism. They inflict no disfiguring human history upon the face of the land, its trees, its soil, wildlife, and waters, except, I suppose one might argue, through fire. They consider it existing always as in the time of creation, always original. Nothing is left behind to suggest an alternate, competing story from the one of a cycling and recycling land. It is not a trivial point. Pushing this slightly further, it is curious to observe how civilization denounces hunting cultures for not making permanent structures and hence indelible changes on the land, as though hunters are too primitive to manage it. And yet to build permanently is to sign history, a principle, a metaphysic that hunters reject. The fundamental difference is not manual and conceptual capacity and ingenuity. It is more properly a difference in conception of self, non-self. Conception of self, non-self. Whew, all right. So, that's for today. We have read parts 1 to 5, chapter 3. Let me just double check this. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, we read 1 to 4. Let me just double check again. Let me double check again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's parts 1 to 4, chapter 3. So I will see you next time. Bye-bye.